Ukraine crisis, Russian attack would be horrific, U.S. warns. Top U.S. General Mark Milley has said that a Russian invasion of Ukraine would be horrific and would lead to a significant number of casualties. Gen Milley described the buildup of 100,000 Russian troops near Ukraine's border as the largest since the Cold War. But U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said conflict could still be avoided through the use of diplomacy. Russia denies plans to invade and says U.S. support for Ukraine is a threat. At a news conference at the Pentagon on Friday, Gen Milley, U.S. President Joe Biden's most senior military officer, warned that the scale of Russia's forces near its border with Ukraine meant an attack would have severe consequences. If that was unleashed on Ukraine, it would be significant, very significant, and it would result in a significant amount of casualties, said the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Fighting in dense urban areas would be horrific, it would be terrible, Gen Milley added. Not inevitable. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said the U.S. was committed to helping Ukraine defend itself, including by providing more weaponry. Conflict is not inevitable. There is still time and space for diplomacy, Mr. Austin said, calling on Russian President Vladimir Putin to de-escalate the situation. There is no reason that this situation has to devolve into conflict. He can order his troops away, he added. Also on Friday, President Biden said he would send a small number of troops to Eastern Europe in the near term, to strengthen the NATO presence in the region. He did not specify where they would be stationed or when they would arrive. Earlier this week, the Pentagon said there were 8,500 combat-ready troops on alert, ready to be deployed at short notice. The U.S. has rejected a key Moscow demand that NATO rule out Ukraine joining the defense alliance, but insisted it was offering Russia a serious diplomatic path. Russian President Vladimir Putin accused the West of ignoring Russia's security concerns. But he said he would study the U.S. response before deciding what to do, according to a Kremlin readout of a call between Mr. Putin and his French counterpart. France said the two leaders had agreed on the need to de-escalate and that its President Emmanuel Macron had told Mr. Putin that Russia must respect the sovereignty of its neighboring states. Don't create panic. The warnings from the Pentagon come after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky told reporters not to create panic over the buildup of Russian troops on his country's borders. At a news conference in Kiev, Mr. Zelensky said he did not see a greater threat now than during a similar massing of troops last spring. There are signals even from respected leaders of states, they just say that tomorrow there will be war. This is panic. How much does it cost for our state? The destabilization of the situation inside the country was the biggest threat to Ukraine, he said. Ukraine is not the Titanic. By Sarah Rainsford, Eastern Europe correspondent. This was a slightly surreal encounter. One after another, journalists asked Ukraine's president about the threat. But Volodymyr Zelensky batted away the questions, accusing the press itself of causing panic. On the other hand, he wasn't contradicting the U.S. intelligence. I can see the 100,000 soldiers, he eventually clarified. But he went from hinting that Russia was simply scaremongering, getting a sadomasochistic pleasure from seeing Kiev sweat, to admitting that Ukraine was preparing for the possibility of all-out war. Still, Mr. Zelensky reminded people that his country has lived with the threat of Russian aggression for years. It goes in cycles, and despite the unusual size of the current deployment, he seemed determined to play down the danger. When it came to the evacuation of some staff by some embassies, Ukraine's leader was openly peeved. Diplomats are like captains, Mr. Zelensky said. They should be the last to leave a sinking ship. And Ukraine